Hey, welcome back to the Fourth Rail. I'm Tom Knighton. I have a belief that to err is human, but to really screw something up, you need to get the government involved. And my guest today's got a great example of that out of North Carolina. Joining me today is a writer for RedState and a whole bunch of other places, including one we're going to get into in a bit. I'm talking about my friend Jeff Charles. Jeff, welcome.
Hey, good to be here.
I appreciate you joining me today. So, you wrote a story for Red State about a situation in Gastonia, North Carolina. In particular, a pastor trying to do something about homelessness, and the city is there is you know, uh, what's a good polite way to put this? Freaking idiots would be a good
Yeah.
way to phrase it. I think.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about that. What's going on?
Yeah. So just to give you the thumbnail sketch version of it, I came across this story on social media probably about a month ago or so. I just hadn't written about it yet. And then, I know some of the people who are involved with helping Pastor Moses Colbert. His ministry is called Faith, Love, and Hope Ministry. They're in Gastonia, North Carolina. And Pastor Moses has been feeding the homeless for about 20 years. But when the COVID 19 pandemic hit, he wanted to kind of expand his operations. He wanted to get a new building to help house and feed and clothe the homeless and to minister to them. And, basically what a pastor in a ministry is supposed to be doing according to the Bible, right? And so when he started
Right.
doing this, the situation really started, which I think that the city was probably planning on trying to find something before, but in one of the buildings that is about 100 years old, somebody was having a medical issue. One of the homeless was, and then the first responders came, but then the fire marshal came and said, "Hey, you don't have sprinklers in this building. You can't house people in here." And he was like, "Okay, it's a 100-year-old building and these people need a place to stay. This is in North Carolina where it gets really cold. So it's like, would you rather have them in this building, or do you really want me to put them out on the streets where they're going to freeze and some of them are going to die?" And so he was having a little bit of a back and forth with the city, and they basically shut down that particular operation. And then the homeless had to leave the building. One person died from freezing to death. Another died from an overdose, because one thing that they do, that his ministry does, is it's designed to help people get off of their addictions. Now, some people don't get off of them, but I mean, you do the best that you can to help people. But then, even all through that, even when he wanted to continue expanding, at some point the city kind of relented and said, "Okay, you can have the homeless on your private property. By the way, this isn't public property, but they can't be inside. They have to stay outside." So they were having people set up tents and things like that, and they were still allowed on the property. But even then, the city was still fining him, giving him fines for zoning issues, for whatever they could come up with. And then on top of that, there's an I don't think it was an organization, but members of the community came up and said, "Hey, we want to help Pastor Moses help homeless people." So they got him two double wide trailers so that he could house people in there. But then once that happened, the city started dinging him for that. Oh, they started giving him fines because of the trailers. Oh, they're not parked in the right way. They're parked illegally. Mind you, again, it's on private property, right? The trailers are parked illegally. It doesn't have a handicap ramp, and a lot of these things, Pastor Moses was like, "Okay, yeah, I'm willing to put this stuff in, but just give me some time and I'll do it." But they keep adding other stuff on. So the bottom line is that the city of Gastonia is making it really difficult for this man to help the homeless for not really any good reason. And it's hard to really figure out why, but I suspect that a lot of it is because the city wants to position itself as the savior here, and this guy is showing them up. On top of that, one of the people who are on the city council, Robert Kellogg, who's leading the charge against Pastor Moses, he also happens to be running for mayor as well. So there's a lot of sleazy stuff going on here. I'm sure that there might be things that Pastor Moses could be doing better. That's the case in every situation. But what the local government is doing is clearly wrong. They would rather see these people on the street, out in the parks, pooping on the sidewalks, rather than seeing them in a place that they actually want to be and getting ministered to, clothed and fed, and having a place to live.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really get that. In going back to the initial incident, if I remember right, you said it was something like 19 degrees that night.
Yeah,
So basically, what happened was it's okay. Something might possibly happen here. Now, the odds of there being a fire in any given building on a particular night are never zero,
sure.
but they're not exactly one either. The
Hmm.
probability is just not that great. So rather than, okay, just be very, very careful tonight and try to get sprinklers in here within the next 30 days,
Hmm.
they're like, nope, you got to turn everyone out into 19-degree weather, which any fool knows is fatal without shelter.
Yeah.
Yeah, basic survival rules. You get 3 hours without warmth, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. Rules of threes with survival. When you're dealing with 19-degree weather, 3 hours is generous.
Hmm.
And they just turned them
Exactly.
out. I mean, it's insane. And yeah, I mean, like, okay, the city may be willing to swoop in to try to save the day, but how do they figure they're going to win this PR battle?
Well,
Someone's willing to do it without taxpayer money.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, when I talked to Pastor Moses, I asked about the local press, and a lot of the local press are on the government side. But although I will say the more recent articles I've seen from local press have been giving him more of a fair shake. But what I've discovered in a lot of these cases, Tom, and I've been really trying to dedicate a lot of my platform to looking at abuses carried about by local governments. In a lot of cases, from what I've been seeing, the press tends to be on the side of the government, so they can get
Yeah.
away with this stuff. And they've been going on Facebook smearing him, pretending that he's a criminal and whatever. And it's just absurd because, like you said, why not just let them keep them there, maybe fix the sprinklers or whatever, instead of just turning them
Mhm.
out into the street where they're going to die. And my whole thing with this is that the city hasn't done much to deal with the homeless issue. Because I
Right.
interviewed I interviewed Pastor Moses about this. I interviewed Mike Ross, who is a libertarian candidate for governor, but he's been very much involved in the situation even before he was running. I've spoken to Spike Cohen with the organization You Are the Power, who's been trying to shed a lot of light on this. He's been getting people to protest, speak at city council meetings. I asked, what's the city doing? If they don't want him doing it, what is the city doing? Not a whole lot. At one point, they got like a really seedy motel to try to house them in there, but the conditions were so bad that the homeless went back to Pastor Moses because that it was unlivable. So they weren't really trying to do anything. They just don't want Pastor Moses doing anything.
Yeah. And I mean, I get that North Carolina is an interesting state politically because on one hand, you know, they're a southern state, which means a lot of people vote red, but they've also got a lot of blue areas to the point that North Carolina could go purple and,
Yeah.
can go either way in any given election. So, it's hard to assume, look at it and just go definitively, well, yeah, it's a red state. What the hell? Or it's a blue state. What do you expect? But North Carolina is also tends to be a pretty religious state,
Hmm.
as most southern states are. And, you would think that they'd be like, oh, well, a pastor's going to step in and minister. We let him.
Yeah.
That's how you do business. That's how things work. And, this is, like you said, this is right up Christianity's aisle. This is what the
Yeah.
churches should be doing. In my hometown, we have one homeless shelter, and it is a Christian organization. It's not an
Hmm.
actual church, but a lot of churches help it.
Yeah.
But it is a Christian based organization. And like Pastor Moses, you can't come in there high. You cannot be
Hmm.
bringing drugs in, you know, that kind of thing, so that people can get off the addiction, which is why a lot of them are on the streets in the first place.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You know, so if you get them off the drugs, they can actually rebuild their lives and, be productive members of society. Uh, they can't do that if they freeze to death.
Yeah, that does
This,
make it kind of hard. Yeah.
yeah, I have yet to see where a dead person has contributed to the economy. I've seen them involved in elections,
Oh
obviously.
yeah, definitely.
Uh,
They definitely vote in
you know,
elections.
right, right. It's like I told a pollster one time, I'll vote Democrat after I die, just like everybody else around here. Uh, but it's that's happened. A lot of people talk about Chicago and that notorious, but I'm in Georgia where we have a history of that as well. So
Yeah.
I'm not throwing shade on any particular community, but yeah, that's dead people don't contribute to the economy, but if they can recover, they can, but they have to survive. And
Hmm.
it's absolutely baffling that the city would throw these insane roadblocks. Like he's putting trailers, mobile homes on private property. And they're not hitting him for, well, they're, this isn't, well, actually, let me back up. I don't know that they're hitting him for, this isn't zoned for, residential, but the illegal parking you mentioned on private property, I should be able to park
Yeah.
however the hell I want to. If I want to
Exactly.
park on my hood, if I
Exactly.
want to be able to park the car upside down on my property, I should be able to do that. You
Yeah.
know, I it's absolutely insane. And they said, like you mentioned, that the city said that they could set up tents, that they could basically create a tent city
Yep.
on their property, and then they fine them for it.
Yeah, exactly. And my thing is, the government shouldn't be able to tell you what you can and can't have on your property at all. Period. So to
No,
me, like, yeah, it's absolutely it's tyrannical. And to me, it's like, I mean, there have been conversations with various members of the city council. One of them I already mentioned, but in one case, this guy said, well, I mean, we want to run him out of town. And I'm like, what has this guy done that is so bad? Because I even asked, like, has this guy actually done some shady stuff? Because why would they be so focused on him? No, he's not. And I won't say that there hasn't been issues with his ministry. There have been people who have OD'd on his property, but he can't reach everybody. But the thing is, if they're all out on the street, you're going to have more people ODing because you don't have somebody there
right.
caring for them and ministering to them. And to me, it's like, and it's not really a party thing, but the city council is mostly Republican. But I've seen Democrats do this stuff too. So to me,
Right.
when it comes to local government, you know, my message is always this: one, don't think that these things can't happen to you or somebody that you love. Two, I guarantee you that wherever you live, whatever city you live in, your government is probably doing some stuff that it shouldn't be doing. But that one of the reasons they get away with it is because we're always focused on national politics. We have been conditioned as a society to focus on the federal government, the presidency, the Congress, the Supreme Court. I'm not
Mhm.
saying those things aren't important. They are, but chances are, if you're going to get abused by a government, it's going to be your local government before it's going to be the federal government.
Yeah, I've after we wrap up, let me tell you some stories. I've got
Okay.
some stories of my own stuff. This is, long old ancient history at this point, but I've run into it too, and it's true. And local government officials can use those agencies, zoning commissions, code enforcement agencies, things like that, to screw over
Hmm.
anyone they don't like. Because I guarantee you, if you look hard enough, you can find a violation
Yeah, there's a
in
case down here
anybody.
in Aransas Pass that I'm working on right now. I won't say too much about it, but that's kind of along the lines of what you're saying, that what the city government is trying to do to him.
Yeah. Well, I hope sincerely Pastor Moses can get something settled here, because it sounds like he's trying to do some good stuff and the city's not letting him. And
Hmm.
it, like I said, it's when I started things off, to err is human, but to really screw stuff up, you need to get the government involved. That's true of
Yes, there you
any
go.
level, any level.
Yep,
Um, it just, I've never seen, there's nothing the government can't screw up, nothing at all.
pretty much. Yeah, yeah.
So, all right, so let's shift gears. We're gonna talk national a little bit,
Hmm.
uh, and well, actually, we're gonna talk gun control, which is national, state, local, the whole
Yep.
works. That's an issue you and I both write on a fair bit.
Hmm.
Um, it's a lot of my full time work, but you've written a lot about it too. In particular, the roots of gun control.
Hmm.
Uh, what is it that you've seen on that regard?
So, it's very interesting how people on the left will cry about systemic racism, right? And they'll say, oh, everything is systemically racist. But they only choose certain types of government sponsored racism. And this is where people on the right make a mistake, because we say there is no systemic racism. But then if I bring up gun control, then the gears start going, oh, okay, well, maybe there are areas in which the government has been racist. So gun control has been racist from its inception, and it is still racist. It never stopped. They just took a different form. Back, I mean, we have laws going back to the 1600s that prohibit black people, whether they're slaves or free, from owning firearms or even any other type of weapon. Like the black person couldn't even own a club. And then as things progressed, the gun laws changed, especially after slavery was done. Basically, those laws said specifically black people shouldn't own guns. Almost every southern state had them. They had different variations on that, but they did. And it was intended to, what they did under the guise of saying, oh, well, black people are all violent and they're vicious. So if we let them have guns, then they'll kill you and rape your women and blah, 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 blah. All the usual fear tactics that they used to use. And so really the reason why is because black people were using guns to defend themselves from groups like the Ku Klux Klan or other racist mobs. We know about the Tulsa massacre. A lot of black people use guns to try to defend themselves there. There's the black history is very much intertwined with the gun. I mean, there's even a book called Negroes and the Gun, which details a lot of that history about how black people used firearms to defend themselves. That's why they passed these laws. If you even fast forward to like the 50s, 60s, and 70s, they still had racist gun laws, but now they can't be explicit with it. They can't write a law saying we hate black people so they can't have guns. What they did is they banned cheap pistols, cheap revolvers, cheap guns. These are called 38 special laws because most black people couldn't afford like the higher class guns, but they could afford these guns to protect themselves with. They banned those guns so that black people couldn't get to them. Now, this is one of those examples to where it could catch up white people who are poor too, but they don't care. The objective was specifically to keep black people from owning firearms. If you go today, we have a similar type of law structure that we do with the 38 special laws. And the Bruin decision from the Supreme Court's Bruin decision has made this harder, but states are still trying to do it. Basically, what they do now in these blue states, especially like in DC, New York City, they will make it so cost prohibitive to own a firearm that you can't own one unless you're a middle class or well-to-do white person, basically. So, I was speaking with Amy Swearer. She was on my podcast from the Heritage Foundation, and she was telling me about the process that she had to go through to get a permit in DC. She had to do a lot of hours of training, so she had to take time off of work. She had to pay a lot of these fees to get the license, to get the training, to get all these things, and they're all exorbitant, and they're even worse now because states like New York and California have made it even more expensive, so that because they can no longer be a may issue state. So these laws disproportionately make it harder for black and brown and poor whites to obtain firearms, which I believe is the intention. I mean, it may have even been on Bearing Arms where saw the story about in New Jersey. This council member, the anti-gun council member, basically said the quiet part out loud because he was saying, do you want people living in these counties to be able to own guns legally? And when you look at the counties, if you look at the demographics, the highest percentages were black and brown. So yes, I do believe that they
I wrote
especially
that
don't
one.
want minorities to own guns. Oh, I think we cut out.
Yeah. Did we?
I see you now.
Okay. Now I was saying I think I wrote that Bearing Arms story actually.
You probably did. It was
But
very
I'm not
good.
100% sure. Just one point of clarification. I think that you meant Saturday night specials instead of 38 specials
No, yeah, you're right. Saturday Night
because those
Special.
were
I'm
usually
sorry.
cheap guns. Yeah. No
Yes.
problem. Just wanted to get that cleared out because otherwise, how YouTube comments go. You
Yep.
know, it is. Yeah. I know you know what you're talking about. We just want to get it on the record here. Uh, and yeah, you're right. It's they keep prohibiting this stuff, and they can't say, well, we want to keep black people from owning guns, or but the impact is pretty obvious, especially when you look at income by ethnicity. Black
Mm-hmm.
people make less than pretty much every other ethnic group
Mm-hmm.
out there. So they're going to be the ones who are least able to jump through the hoops and pay for $1,000 training class, which Massachusetts has a bill that's going to mandate a class that I don't see how it's not going to cost $1,000
Yeah.
because it requires a whole bunch of stuff that, it's just nobody has right now. Training, live fire shooting. It's funny. You have to actually pass a live fire training class in order to buy a gun. So in other words, you have
Hmm.
to show you can shoot before you have a way to practice shooting.
Yes.
Um, and then there's the fact that if you're going to assume, and Democrats are really bad about saying this law disproportionately impacts black people, therefore it's racist, until you show that gun laws do the exact same thing.
Exactly.
Then it's like, well, that's different. That's
Uh-huh.
different.
Yeah, and here's the thing, Tom.
Yeah.
Here's how I know that this is their intention. In a lot of these states, if you have to get a driver's license, right? But if you are low income, they have a different program for you. You pay lower fees. So if they wanted this to be
Right.
equitable, then they would say, okay, we're going to make it really expensive to get a permit to carry. But for people who are lower income, we'll have a different structure and different program that you can use so that you can obtain a firearm and obtain a license.
Yeah.
None of these states do that. None of them. I checked. So that tells me right there, because they'll do that with other things like a driver's license, but not so that you can exercise your Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. And black people are the ones who need that the most, which is why you have seen an increase in black gun ownership. I'd be curious to see how it's been going in those cities and states that make it so cost prohibitive. But I mean, most black people live in the South. So a lot of the southern states don't have a lot of these ridiculous gun laws. But
Right.
to me, it's them doing it without saying it explicitly what they're doing.
Yeah. And let's go back to history a little bit. You brought up the Tulsa massacre.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know how familiar you are with Georgia state history. Uh,
Not much.
up until recently, we had a clause in the gun control law called the public gathering clause. You could not carry a firearm to a quote unquote public gathering,
Mm.
including things like sporting events, political rallies, et cetera, et cetera. Um, that law came out of something called the Camilla Massacre.
Mm.
A couple of black Republicans were ousted from the state legislature, and some blacks here in Southwest Georgia, Camilla is actually not that far from where I live, decided to march from Camilla to Albany, where I live, to protest. Seemingly innocuous enough. It's a long walk. I'm kind of impressed, but
Yeah.
they want to do it. Well, a group of white people basically hid along the march route and opened fire. Shot a
Mm.
bunch of them. So a lot of the black folks went home, got their guns, and continued their march. Well,
Mm.
now it's unsporting because they can shoot back.
Yeah.
And so because at the time, this is during Reconstruction, and you can't write a law saying that black people can't own guns anymore. So what you do is you write a law saying, well, nobody can carry a gun to a public gathering, knowing good and well no white sheriff is going to enforce that law on a white person.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
That was what a lot of people don't forget about these laws is there was a wink and a nod that the sheriffs weren't going to enforce it on white people. White people would do
Mm.
whatever they want, except for some of those poor whites who, they didn't like them anyways. They were,
Yeah. Yeah.
in their view, the poor whites were a little different than black people in a lot of
Hmm.
cases.
Yeah. That's true.
Which is why it's so funny. It's why it's funny. You're more likely to find racism among poor white people when you're sitting here going, you do realize you were treated the exact same way. Well, okay, that's unfair. You were treated similarly. It's not quite the same thing. We didn't have a
Yeah.
lot of poor white people being lynched.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
don't want to say something stupid off the cuff when it's
No,
not
we
quite.
know what you mean. We know what you mean.
Yeah, uh, yeah. But this is the internet. Not everybody does.
That's true.
You know,
Or they'll pretend
um,
not to.
or they'll pretend not to exactly. But you were treated. They were treated a little different in the grand scheme of things, and it was just absolutely insane that you see that to me. It just, I'm like sitting there going. Of course, I think part of it was also they resented it so much. Part of that racism may have been resentment that they were being treated the same. And instead of
Yeah.
focusing on the people who did it, They focused on the other poor bastards who were getting treated like crap.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Uh,
That is exactly what happened. It's funny because I recently saw To Kill a Mockingbird on stage. And the guy from John Boy from the Waltons, he played Atticus Finch,
yes.
and they talk a
Okay.
lot about that in the play and in the story about
Richard
how,
Thomas.
yeah, about how a lot of poor whites were being treated really badly. Like you said, not as bad as the black folks, but still being treated
Right.
badly. But their
Mhm.
solution was, wait, we need to be elevated above them, but not have equality or whatever. I'm like, you guys probably have at least some things in common to where you could work together. I say that same thing today. I say that thing today. Like, I
Mhm.
mean, I have a good friend who says this too. The average blue collar black person has more in common with a white redneck blue collar than they
Mhm.
think. And if they would actually talk to each other, they would realize that. And in a lot of cases, I've seen them have those conversations. But it's true.
And they find out that the challenges aren't that different.
Yeah.
They really isn't. I mean, I live in a very economically oppressed area because Albany's actually like 60% black.
Yeah, it is.
Um,
Yeah.
so I'm actually a minority
Yep.
in my town. I'm actually a minority, uh,
Yeah. And
which is
Albany's been pretty destitute for a long time, hasn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting story. Of course, we're getting off track here, but it's still an interesting story. Uh, in the 1980s, we had one of our major employers was Firestone Tire Company,
Okay.
and they pulled up stakes and left town.
Oh,
Just
wow.
we're done. And unfortunately, they did this around the same time, you know, crack got to town.
Mm,
So what happened was you had a bunch of people who had just lost everything. They lost their jobs. They weren't going to be able to keep their houses, but they'd gotten a severance package that gave them some disposable income. And there was this new thing that promised to take their worries away.
wow.
And we have never recovered. We've never
Wow.
recovered. And it's funny listening to some people talk because you got the new libertarian, the 18-year-old who just read Atlas Shrugged, who will sit there and go, well, why didn't they just start businesses? Do, do you know how hard it is to start a business,
Yeah.
especially when you've been working in manufacturing?
Yeah, exactly. How do you pivot from that? Like,
Right. If you've been
yeah.
working on a line making tires, you don't know enough to start your own tire company.
Yeah, especially back in the
You know,
day. I mean, nowadays it might be a little easier because of the internet and there's a lot of different things you can do. But back then, if that's all you know,
right,
yeah, it's
right,
not that easy to just up and start a business.
right. It's like if it happened today, we'd probably be a little better off because of course it wouldn't be crack, it'd be fentanyl or whatever. But you
Hmm.
know, there are options. You can, there's a lot of ways you can get retrained, and you can do all this
Hmm.
stuff online, and you could start an online business. There's a lot of options, and yeah, that might have worked back, then in the early to mid 1980s, not so much.
Yeah.
And to the point that we were at one time the murder capital of the United States.
Hmm.
People
Yeah.
wonder why I carry a gun.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
it's like I like to joke that we were worried for a little while there, but we pulled together as a community and got those last three murders.
Yeah.
Uh, but I mean, we can't do anything about it. Murder's actually really hard to police. So
Yeah,
law
it is.
enforcement, all they could do is they had 100% closure rate. They were arresting someone for all the murders. They were doing
Hmm.
they were doing their job. But it was Albany is an interesting place,
Yeah.
and those demographics do make it very interesting, especially because I am a minority in a majority black community with majority black leadership, and
Hmm.
all that stuff. Kind of makes that whole racism equals prejudice plus power. I always like to point out, does that mean I'm only
Yeah.
incapable of being racist in my county? If I
Yeah.
go
See,
to Lee
that's
County,
why
the
I
next
never bought
county
into
over,
that
does that change?
definition. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny how at no point will I ever lack power, even
Hmm.
though in my local community, which as you pointed out, they can destroy me in so many different new and interesting ways. You know, they have so many tools available to make my life difficult,
Hmm.
and yet I still have power. That's just I'm kind of
Yeah.
impressed. I'm just trying to figure out where I put it.
Yeah.
I must have
Exactly.
packed it before my last move. Now I can't find it. Um, so now that we've talked about that aspect of gun control, we gonna talk.
Yes.
Uh, let's talk about a publication called The Smattering. What is that for the people who are unaware?
The smattering is one of the most cutting edge, up and coming news sites that reports news that isn't true, but could be. So that is,
Oh yeah.
yeah, that is my Substack where I do all of my political satire. I started it. I think I started it late last year because I used to always do satirical tweets, and we'll get into one of those, I'm sure. And then I'm like, you know what? Maybe I can just actually make this a thing because I used to do satirical headlines about crazy things, and there'd always be a good chunk of people who thought they were real. Most of them got the joke, or at least wondered if it was parody. But you always have some people who just take it as it is, which I've done myself with satire. I've fallen for it too. But yeah, I love writing satire, and it's been a lot of fun, and people love it.
Well, there was one case I didn't completely love, uh, and of course you know what I'm talking about because we've talked about this before. But you wrote a story about a anti-gun group that was going to buy AR-15s for every black man in America,
Hmm.
and I jumped on it because it just felt real. I wrote it for bearing arms. I'll take the hit. Yeah, I'm not going to hide from the fact that I made that mistake. Uh, in part because it was really no well done satire. It Poe's law is a thing for a reason. I mentioned that to you when we talked on Twitter about it.
Hmm.
Uh, but what the only real giveaway there was the anti-gunners. The anti-gunners that were quoted just couldn't help but call Republicans bigots.
Hmm.
But I fell for it for two reasons. One was, of course, your name was attached, and I knew you write for RedState. I'm like, well, of course, he's legit. Uh, that's a mistake I will never make again, by the way. Uh, but the other was that I have heard enough anti-gunners make the argument that if you gave an AR-15 to every black man in America, the Republican Party would push for gun control immediately. But black gun owners are the fastest growing segment of the gun owning population. And as a gun rights writer, we freaking love it.
Yes. You know,
I mean, I do.
yeah, the reason I wrote that satire was to make fun of that because
Yeah.
it is it's something that they really wish were true. They want that to be true, but they
Yeah.
know it's not. Every single time I've seen somebody post a picture of black people carrying guns, my 80% of my audience is conservative libertarian. They love it. They
Uh-huh.
celebrate the fact that black gun ownership is on the rise. Over the past 3 years, a lot of black people are becoming first-time gun owners. I'm one of them. I
Yep.
became a gun owner in 2021. I've
Congratulations.
got my Black Guns Matter shirt on. So,
Mash approves. Mash
exactly.
approves.
He does. He does. So to me, when they say these things, one, they know it's not true, but two, I can't tell if they're dumb or they just think that their audiences are dumb, but that hasn't happened. I mean, yeah, you've got some
Embrace.
Republicans who are down with gun control. Republicans are not perfect
Yeah.
on the gun issue. They're just not as
Right.
bad as Democrats at this point. So, but
Mhm.
in general, nobody's trying to crack. The only people trying to crack down on black gun ownership are the people who make this comment, are Democrats, are progressives.
Yeah.
And at the end of that article, and this is something I did on purpose so that people would know it's satire. I basically put that, what's going to happen after these gun laws are passed and you got all these black people with AR-15s. Oh, well, now we'll just go ahead and arrest them for having it. So to me, that's
Yeah.
exactly what they would do. But the thing
Mhm.
about satire, Tom, it's hard, especially in 2023 in this day and age, because the idea of satire is that you take something and you want to make a point, you have a subtext, and you're making a point using humor. So you have to exaggerate to a point to where people are like, okay, that can't possibly be true. This is hilarious, but I get the point he's making. Things are so crazy nowadays that it is very hard to do that because you can write
Yeah.
something crazy and it sounds believable.
And this is something you mentioned that I am not the only one to have fallen for it before.
Mm-mm.
I'm not the first. I'm not the first you got. Let's talk about that so I can feel better about myself.
Yes, you should feel good about this because so this was back this was during not the midterm elections. It was during Virginia's gubernatorial elections. And
Okay.
do you remember how the Lincoln Project paid some people to go in front of Glenn
Yeah.
Youngkin's van and pretend to be white supremacists? So when
Yes,
I
I
saw
remember
that,
that.
I was like, okay, yeah, they just won the election for Youngkin. That was a really stupid move. After he won,
What did it?
yeah, after he won, I posted a tweet saying, breaking, Glenn Youngkin's team sends a fruit basket and thank you card to the Lincoln Project for helping them win the Virginia gubernatorial election. And then in quotes, I put something like, hey, they really did a good job of helping us win, so we thought we'd show our appreciation. That tweet went viral. I've had a few of those tweets go viral, but that's the one that I'm most proud of. Winsome Sears commented on it, and she made a comment to the Lincoln Project saying, "Hey, how'd you like that fruit basket?" I was like, "No, you weren't supposed to take it that seriously." This is one of those tweets that I put out that I did not expect to get as big as it did, and it got out beyond my control. Because I'll even say, like, I would say to my audience, if I put breaking in a tweet, that means it's satire unless I say otherwise. But
It's right
people
there
will,
in your bio.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I even have it in my bio. Even my the smattering on the site itself says all the news that isn't true but could be. It just doesn't say it on the article itself. But to me, it's so it spread like wildfire, and I was like, I can't get. Well, I'm just gonna let it go because I mean, people are gonna take it seriously. I mean, there are a couple smaller news sites that covered it, but then Guy Benson, I love this man, with Town Hall. He has a radio show, he has a podcast, but he's on Fox News a lot. And I get a message from one of my followers saying, "Hey, Guy Benson brought up your satire on Greg Gutfeld." I was like, "No!" They sent me the clip, and he's talking to Greg, and they're talking about the Virginia election, and he says, "Yeah, you know what? I heard that Glenn Youngkin's team sent a fruit basket and a thank you card to the Lincoln Project, thanking them for helping win the election." I was like, "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh!" And I was like, I need to get a hold of this guy so I can tell him that it was satire. And I was right about to text Kira Davis, who was our Red State's editor at the
Yeah.
time, and then I see her tweet to Guy Benson. He's like, "Guy, this was satire. This is one of our knucklehead writers who does satire all the time." And I guess they talked, and he said he already found out, and that he's going to talk about it on his podcast. So I'm sure he was a good sport about it. But yeah, when
Yeah.
I saw that it made national television, I was like, I have arrived.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's funny that Kira was involved because a lot of people don't know that I got my gig at Bearing Arms through Kira.
Oh, really? I got my
Right.
Red State.
Kira and I,
I got Red State through Kira.
yeah, I got it. Kira and I wrote for a publication that doesn't even exist anymore called Same Page Nation.
Mm,
And she was brought in for a little bit, and she left there to go become an editor at Red State.
hmm
And that wound down. The people who were running it just wasn't making the money that they needed to keep it sustainable.
hmm
Uh, and I was needing something, so I reached out to her. I was like, "Hey, you got any openings for some writers at Red State?" And I didn't. She's like, "Yeah, let me check." And she kind of forgot about it for a little bit, and I touched base with her, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm sorry, it slipped my mind that happens. Please forgive me. I'll let you. Let me find out." And then the next day, she's like, "We need somebody to write over at Bearing Arms. Do you do anything? What do you know about the Second Amendment?" I'm like, "I'm a gun nut." I'm like, "Please
Nice.
throw me in the briar patch, please."
hmm
And that's how I landed there. It was really because of Kira. She was, got me in through the town hall family. So
Yeah, she's incredible.
it's I love Kira. I absolutely love her to death.
hmm
She's great, and I owe her quite a bit because Bearing Arms has been very good to me.
hmm
So I'm very very happy about that. I just think it's funny that because I knew there was a story there. I didn't know Kira was involved, so that's just amusing to me.
Yeah,
Uh, and yeah,
it
you,
was
you got me
it was
good on that one
crazy.
because it was that story was just close enough that I couldn't completely rule it out.
Yeah, and if it also makes you feel better, I did a satire. This was just a few months ago, that Donald Trump Jr. had to set straight because remember when Elon did that poll saying, do you want me to step down, and they voted to step down. And then people were saying, be careful what you wish for. So I did a satire saying, breaking, Elon Musk announces that he's appointing Donald Trump Jr. as a new Twitter CEO. That one spread like wildfire. And I guess a lot of people were hitting Donald Trump Jr. up about it. So he posted a tweet and on his Instagram saying, this isn't true, but it would be hilarious if it was.
Yeah. That's the thing, is you're catching just that right edge.
Yeah.
Like you said, it all could be true. So,
Yeah.
oh man, that's freaking amazing.
Yeah, it's great.
So, okay,
and to be fair, just in case anybody wants to check it out, I go after both sides. So I mock Republicans, I mock conservatives, I mock progressives, I mock everybody. Nobody is safe from me.
Well, in fairness, who isn't mockable?
Absolutely nobody.
It's that's the thing about American politics, is if you're not mockable, you're not doing anything.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Which in and of itself is also mockable. So that gets confusing. But all right, well, we've been at this for a while. We're coming up on, past the 40-minute mark. So I'm going to wrap it up here with you.
Okay.
I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you coming on, not just to talk about how you got me, but, definitely everything else we talked about has been great. I'd love to have you on some other time, because this has been a blast.
Definitely. I'm looking forward to it.
All righty, folks. So thank you for joining me this week. We had obviously there's a lot going on. And the truth is, Jeff and I could have talked for about 3 hours about all the stupid out there in the universe. So on that note, we are going to wrap it up. If you like this video, hit like and subscribe, because frankly, YouTube doesn't pay us any attention otherwise. So, and with that, I will see you next week.